Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Today's seminar is Shadow IT, the good, the bad, and the really stupid. Now, before we get going here, a couple of housekeeping items. If you've never used GoToWebinar before, on the right side you'll see there is a box called Questions. If you can't see it, then there may be a arrow next to the word Questions, and you can expand that. If any questions come up during the presentation, go ahead and ask them in there, and at the end of the presentation during Q&A, we will answer all of your questions. I am your presenter today. My name is Arlo Gilbert. I am the CEO and co-founder of Metasas. If you have any questions after this presentation, feel free to contact me by email. I am also active on Twitter and LinkedIn, and you can connect with me there. So let's go ahead and get started. Shadow IT is a really big concept. Historically, Shadow IT meant a lot of different kinds of things. Sometimes it meant endpoints that weren't managed. Sometimes it meant devices that were being brought into the organization. But for our purposes, Shadow IT represents unsanctioned IT. And it really is all encompassing. But when we talk about Shadow IT nowadays, we mostly are talking about SaaS applications. In the IT department, they use a lot of different words for it. Sometimes it's phantom IT, sometimes it's stealth IT, sometimes it's shadow IT. And the biggest challenge really with all shadow IT is that IT simply doesn't even know it exists. When a company is in charge of managing thousands of employees and maintaining compliance, IT not knowing about its existence is a really big problem. And the way that shadow IT usually gets into an organization now is that employees buy things. They use corporate credit cards, they invoice, they bring in free applications, and they bring them in with good intentions, but they don't understand the risk that they're bringing into the organization. Now, according to Forbes, there are some fairly staggering numbers. 40% of the IT spend in an average company is outside of the CIO's control. You would expect that all of the IT budget would be under the CIO's control, but that's really changed in the last 10 years, largely due to the rise of SaaS. There is a little bit of cognitive dissonance, however, because CIOs don't believe that they control that. They think they control 80% of it. And that 20% differential between what they actually think they control and what they don't control presents a lot of risk. Now, if we look over at Symantec, they say that 37% of the people in their survey think that they are actually using and deploying cloud applications without consulting IT. And this matches up with that 40% of IT spending if you notice that those numbers are pretty close. And again, without consulting IT, bringing applications in, not going through procurement, not going through the security protocols, this is a big challenge. Now, usually shadow IT is used in reference to something really terrible and scary, but shadow IT has some good things about it. The rise of SaaS and the rise of mobile applications have really brought additional productivity. The reason that shadow IT has historically been considered to be such a bad thing is because if an application is brought into an organization and that organization has obligations around compliance, that organization can now be out of compliance by virtue of having that application in there. Applications nowadays tend to interconnect. So when you have your Salesforce, a lot of applications that you have in your organization may connect to Salesforce and bring data out of Salesforce and into those applications. And if those applications are shadow IT, you have a lot of risk around that data. As well, costs can really spiral out of control. Modern SaaS applications are built to proliferate virally. You look at applications like Slack, they traditionally come in through a single employee who then invites other employees, who then invite other employees, and IT doesn't discover it until a substantial number of people at the company are using it. When these things start getting upgraded into business unit licenses and enterprise agreements, and they get buried inside of incorrect budget areas, then you have expenses that you don't even know about. And so it becomes a real challenge of managing your costs. And then last but not least is the complexity. There are a lot of reasons that shadow IT can bring complexity, some of which are, for example, your help desk. If your help desk is not aware of an application, they are not equipped to support it. but the users in the organization don't necessarily know that the help desk doesn't have this information. So adding lots of vendors increases your help desk problems. It also can increase the complexity around managing your contracts. Now, that's Forbes and Symantec's view. Gartner has a different perspective. And I don't like to read off of slides, but this quote's pretty good. So I think everybody should take just a moment to read the quote, and I'll read it out loud. But shadow IT is a battle you can't win. The decentralization of IT makes it hard to manage, but it's not all bad. Call it citizen innovation instead of shadow IT because it's more positive. It describes people in different areas like marketing, HR, and supply chain that know how to apply technology to solve problems. This innovation should be embraced. And this is really how the modern CIO has to approach their technology stack. Buying behaviors have changed, and you can't enforce a top down methodology very effectively anymore because employees work from home. Employees use their own computers. Employees bring their own mobile devices. And even when they're inside of your firewall, they can still find ways to get around them. So rather than playing a cat and mouse game of trying to always keep everything under control, businesses have to adopt and embrace this new buying methodology. And IT really isn't great. If you're inside of a marketing unit and you have a quick job to get done and there's a tool that can help you get that job done quickly, efficiently, and for a reasonable price, having to go through an entire procurement cycle and having to get IT oversight to use that tool is cumbersome and adds a lot of time to that process. And something you could have accomplished in an hour can now take weeks. So using SaaS really is a good thing. And even shadow SaaS is a wonderful thing. Now, the growth of SaaS and applications has really been pretty staggering. By 2020, SaaS will be a $105 billion business, and it's growing at 20% compounded annually. And then if you include mobile applications like the App Store, you're talking about millions of different applications. Now, at MetaSaaS, we maintain a database of all of the SaaS vendors, and that contains right now about 32,000 different vendors. And there are between 20 to 50 new vendors launching every day. Keeping track of that and trying to manage that is a real headache. So, how do you embrace shadow IT without trying to enforce those old top down methodologies? There are a lot of different ways, and a lot of this is about education and process. So first, you really need to encourage an open dialogue about this. If employees are afraid that there are consequences for bringing in applications, they are not going to tell you about them. You need to have an open door policy, and you need to be welcoming to new applications. You've got to stop treating SaaS and shadow IT as being a bad thing. You have to do some education. You have to talk to your employees and explain your compliance reasons for having some of your IT policies. A lot of companies have IT policies, but they never explain why. They never explain to the employees why these IT policy exists. If you're in healthcare and you care about HIPAA, sitting down with your employees or having a quick webinar explaining why your company has to comply with HIPAA and what the consequences could be is a really important thing to do. And once they're educated and they understand the reason for that compliance, they're going to be happier to self-report. The third thing you really need to do is you need to ease and expedite the SaaS procurement approval process. And you can do this through lots of different ways. But by having multi-week or multi-month approval processes, you force employees to go behind your back. And then last, you have to reward people, whether it's just giving them a pat on the back or having some kind of reward at the end of the year, but letting people know that you appreciate them letting you know about the SaaS that they are using or the SaaS that they've discovered is effective. You can effectively crowdsource a lot of your shadow IT discovery by having an open dialogue with your employees. But we're not suggesting that you simply let things run rampant, because you do have compliance to worry about. You do have costs to concern yourself with. And so you do need to have governance around your SaaS. And having that governance involves using the right tools. Now, some interesting facts. 71% of organizations admit to using unsanctioned applications. And quite honestly, the other 29% are just lying. Every single company has shadow IT. They're just the ones that pretend they don't, and the ones that acknowledge that they do. Now, the ways that you can improve this process is by establishing a quick procurement and governance policy and then sharing this with your employees. So, a good example could be buy whatever you want, but within 24 hours of buying it, you need to tell us about it. And there can be consequences for not following these policies. Just as much as you want to reward them for telling you, there need to be consequences if they don't follow your procurement processes. You need to implement that procurement protocol in a way that's simple. A lot of companies use tools that create workflows. There are a lot of emails that go unanswered, and that is what causes the employees to go around behind your back. And then again, you have to enforce the policies. By having policies that are doable by your employees, enforcement suddenly becomes something that is reasonable. Now, one of the key ways that you can manage all of your SaaS and manage all of this shadow IT is by using a SaaS management platform. This is what we do at MetaSaaS. We are a unified SaaS management application. And one of our key components is the capability to discover shadow IT. Discovering shadow IT, as far as SaaS goes, really means that you have to understand all of the cloud applications and you have to figure out how you're going to buy them. And the one and only thing that every SaaS application has in common is that they're businesses. So at MetaSaaS, we use financial transactions as the mechanism to discover that shadow IT. We scan expense reports, ERPs, invoices. It's really pretty cool. Now, if you look at how much money you are losing because of renewals you didn't know about, or because of risk that's been introduced, or penalties. Our last webinar was covering the GDPR, the upcoming EU legislation around data management and privacy. The GDPR has not yet been enforced because it goes into effect in May of 2018. But the penalty there is 4% of your global gross revenues for a single violation. Now, we have yet to see whether they'll enforce at the high end or the low end, or whether they'll give out slaps on the wrist. But just one of those problems can be quite a headache. So the cost of managing this effectively and managing this well is far less than the cost of ignoring it. Now, a lot of companies have gone out and tried to solve this problem on their own. They've perhaps gone and used a workflow tool. A lot of companies try spreadsheets, and you'd be surprised how many of the companies we talk to still use things like Post-it notes on their monitor, reminding them that they have a major renewal coming up, or reminding them that they need to bring something to IT's attention. And spreadsheets and Post-it notes just don't work. What you really need to use is a cloud application that's built to manage this. The old mechanisms of software asset management that sit on premise, or they have agents sitting on your PC, have a lot of failings because they do things like they watch what the person's doing on the PC, but what they're not watching is what the person's doing when they're at home on their own computer. Similarly, firewalls are great, but they can only monitor the traffic on your network. And when your employees are off-site, or if they're at their home, or if you have a growing remote workforce, those policies and tools may not work. So transparency is really the important thing. The way that MetaSaaS works is we connect into, again, expense reporting, accounting, and payment vendors. And bringing that all into a single dashboard can save you hundreds of hours per month. Understanding exactly how many unsanctioned products are in your company is critical, and then being able to quickly quantify what that spend is on unsanctioned IT. And when you take a look at our customers and what has happened in the past, if you remember, we discussed a 40% number that's outside of the CIO's control. That 40% number almost fully equates to the amount of money that we find that's sitting inside of those shadow IT silos. So we talked about educating your employees and how best to try and have a good dialogue so that they understand why you want to manage these things. And here are some of the key things that you can share with them and the ways that you can communicate that so that they understand and are willing to comply with your policies. So 86% of users, again, they say that these SaaS applications help them to get their jobs done better than desktop alternatives. Now, a lot of companies still have anywhere from 50 to 90% of their applications as desktop or on-premise applications, but more than 50% of all the applications that are being bought now are SaaS. So that trend is shifting. And inside of your company, you are going to see a big shift from on-premise into cloud. And the reason is simply that Cloud is better. There's no maintenance. Things just work. There's not an installation process. They don't have to worry about antivirus tools, and you don't have to worry about trying to maintain and help desk an agent or a piece of software that's sitting on a mismanaged computer. So, the way that you need to communicate this with your employees is pretty simple. You just need to encourage compliance. Again, we talked about making a faster, more streamlined procurement and IT request process, and letting them know that you have policies in place and that you're keeping an eye on these things. Right now, when employees go out and buy SaaS on their corporate credit cards, or they expense them out, or when a business unit owner places something under miscellaneous marketing, but it's really software as a service, they're doing it because they know that nobody's keeping track of this stuff. They know that they can get their job done faster, and they just don't want to deal with IT. So, by making sure that your employees know that you're using a SaaS management system or some sort of tool to keep track of what they're buying and exactly what's happening inside of your walls, you're going to open up a dialogue. Again, you're uncovering the shadow IT. You're contacting them to let them know that you found something, and the benefits are huge. You're going to reduce your risks and you're going to reduce your costs. And this can be for employees that have stocks or options or profit sharing plans. This is a conversation that can be meaningful. By doing a good job of letting us know what you have, you're really going to help the company make more money. So, final takeaways on how you can handle shadow IT. Again, controlling shadow IT is not about trying to lock it down. Controlling shadow IT is really about being willing to adopt and being willing to adjust to your employees' existing behavior. You're not going to ever be able to lock it all down. So instead, be willing to accept that this is inside of your walls and put in processes and tools to help you manage it. Again, you need to reframe what your company thinks about shadow IT. And sometimes this means letting your CIOs know that they're a really important part of the business, because CIOs have often seen themselves as infrastructure and agent management systems. And by including them as part of this digital transformation and including them in part of the business conversation, you can really reframe how your company thinks about cloud applications. Educate your employees, talk to them about the why of why you need to manage, talk to them about the challenges that you have with compliance and risk issues, and educate them overall about how you're going to do things going forward. And then last but not least, you really need to invest in a SaaS management tool. If you're not investing in a SaaS management tool now, it will only get worse, and this problem will become harder for you to manage over time. If you have 40 SaaS applications at your company that you know about, you probably have 100 that you don't know about. And in 2 years, the 50 that you know about will probably be 200 you don't know about. And it's really a question of when a breach occurs, when a violation of a compliance issue, a compliance requirement happens, or when that budget becomes so out of control that you're pulling your hair out trying to figure things out. So with that, I'll open up to questions. If anybody has any questions about shadow IT, how we approach it, how other companies approach it, or how our customers have succeeded, I'd be happy to answer those. All right, so we've got one question here. They're saying, is this an all or nothing approach? I'm assuming we should try and control the apps that we can control. And this is absolutely spot on. A lot of these applications give you the ability to restrict by IP, to restrict with using great tools like single sign-on. We're big proponents of single sign-on at Metasas. Um, and by using those tools, you can enforce security on those tools. But what you can't do is you can't manage the unsanctioned spend using those tools. So for the applications that you do have capabilities to put good security protocols in place, absolutely do that. But for the rest of them, the ones that you can't put under single sign-on or the ones that you don't know about, you do need to be addressing those. Yeah, let's see, we have one more question. The question is, with regards to governance within our company, you mentioned enforcement policies, consequences for noncompliance. Can you share any examples? Sure. Our customers have gone through different processes. Some of them haven't changed their internal processes at all. Some of them have gone to the far extreme of becoming very open to new SaaS applications. A typical enforcement policy is similar to HR violations. If there is if there is a violation of that policy, once you have had that conversation and explained the reasons and put in place, a set of consequences, it can be as simple as a manager having a conversation with the employee to reiterate the importance of bringing that bringing that SaaS to IT's attention. And then after further violations, you have to follow your own internal process. But employees who are not willing to comply with your own policies, they may not be great employees. And one more question. The question about ownership. Should we in IT just stop trying to own technology and pass that responsibility off to the business units? That's a good question, and we are not suggesting at all that IT does not play a critical role in the organization. In fact, quite the opposite. IT has an opportunity now to become a more important part of the organization, as long as they are being nimble and adopting to modern ways. IT is still so critical for security and compliance, and you really don't want to hand off these kinds of management issues to business unit owners, because business unit owners are not trained in understanding how best to manage these kinds of things. It would be a big mistake to just let your business owners run their own IT department. IT is definitely very important. And one more question we've got. With regards to employee communication, any tips for the employees up the reporting chain? For example, CEOs and CTOs, this might be hard for them to swallow. This is absolutely true. When you start getting to higher level employees, they may have some resentment around new policy. Um, the best you can do is to bring those highly engaged stakeholders into the conversation about the why. High level employees are going to care a lot more about how this impacts compliance and profitability than they are going to be worried about a slap on the wrist. Nobody's going to fire their CEO for buying a copy of Dropbox. But what you can do is you can show them white papers and examples of how this shadow SaaS and shadow IT has caused headaches in other companies. We really need not look much further than companies like Equifax to see the consequences of a major security breach. So identifying use cases, identifying exact examples of where these problems have created massive headaches for companies can be the best way to have those conversations with your C-level people. The webinar was recorded, and a copy of the presentation and the video will be sent out to all participants for sharing internally with your colleagues or for sharing on social media. With that, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. We hope this is educational, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.